Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to Daring Cities 2021. My name is Ariel Dakovic, and I am Head of Global Communications at ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability. I'm so excited to welcome you today to the second edition of Daring Cities, the global virtual forum for urban leaders taking on the climate emergency. Daring Cities is supported by major contributions from the federal city of Bonn, the federal state of North Rhine-Westphalia, the Ministry of the Environment of the Government of Japan, the Foundation for International Dialogue of the Savings Bank in Bonn, and the Federal Ministry for the Economic Cooperation and Development of Germany. We have a great deal in store for you in the next hour and for the rest of this week. So without further ado, I will introduce Gino Van Bagen, Secretary General of ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability.
Honorable mayors, governors, deputies, councillors, experts and practitioners, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. According to the latest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, that appeared in August this year, the concentration of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere is higher than it has ever been in the last 2 million years. The IPCC is explicit that the unprecedented rate of global warming is induced by human activity, and that the global surface temperature will continue to increase until at least the mid-century, irrespective of the emission scenarios considered. Global warming will exceed the 1.5 degrees Celsius, if not 2 degrees, rise in average temperature during the 21st century, unless drastic reductions in carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions do occur in the coming decades. To limit this human-induced global warming, we must urgently and radically decarbonize our economies and societies to reach climate neutrality, in particular net zero CO2 emissions, along with strong reductions in all other greenhouse gas emissions. Here, the leaders of government at all levels, be it cities, towns, regions, or nations, must undertake collaborative action together with industry and the broader civil society. So what must be done concretely? First, all governments should declare a climate emergency, similar to declaring a pandemic such as the COVID-19 pandemic. And this at a local, regional, and even national level. As of today, more than 2,000 jurisdictions worldwide have already taken this very first decisive step. The second step is to set up enabling frameworks, encouraging and support innovation, the design and implementing decarbonizing policies, the promotion of new and best technologies available, and to stimulate personal behavior change towards a 1.5 degrees lifestyle. The third step is to increase the resilience of human life and our built environment, to stop the degradation of our nature and biodiversity, and to achieve a global and fair understanding that these are all inherently connected with each other. Ladies and gentlemen, let us be clear. We know beyond all doubt the steps that must be taken, and we know that time is of the essence. Soon, 2/3 of the world's population will live in urban areas. Urban areas are at the center of economic activity, development, revenue creation, governance, but also of global pollution. The responsibility on local leaders is thus immense. There is no way we can limit global warming to the 1.5 degrees Celsius if local leaders do not act now. The ICLEI network stands for Achieving a Resilient Net Zero Emission Climate Neutral Future. We align with science in that it is essential to achieve climate neutrality in all governmental operations and in our communities at the latest by mid-century and to halve emissions by 2030. At ICLEI, we work closely with our members to help set such midterm targets for 2030 as part of our alliance in the UN Race to Zero and the UN Race to Resilience. Our ICLEI Green Climate Cities program, our ICLEI Climate Neutrality Framework, Our reporting systems, our initiatives on food, mobility, and circularity, and our Cities with Nature platform can guide subnational governments to act on the climate emergency. From north to south, a number of nations are stepping up their commitments through an increased pattern of multi-level collaboration. In many countries, ICLE has played a key role in these efforts. The engagement of cities and regions in the global diversity process is advancing, proving that multi-level action has to be part of the new normal if global goals are to be met by 2030. However, there is still a serious gap between these commitments and what is needed to bring the world on a 1.5 degrees pathway. At the same time, vaccine inequity is deepening with the potential to damage the global solidarity, and this can impact our joint efforts to mobilize a response to the climate emergency. We know the ask is great, but it is not impossible. We have designed Daring Cities 2021 to show that there are cities, towns, and regions around the world and operating in a variety of different contexts that are already implementing bold, decisive climate action as a response to the climate crisis. Furthermore, we are offering a number of capacity building opportunities on different themes to help local leaders and practitioners to overcome some of the most common barriers to implementing the much needed ambitious local climate action. And the opportunities do not cease after this particular week. Throughout Urban October, there will be a number of events to both spread the messages of Daring Cities, as well as further enable more ambitious integrated climate action at the local level. And finally, we will bring the outcomes of Daring Cities 2021 directly to COP26 in Glasgow through both our demand catalog and the collection of best Daring Cities practices. Dear participants, the only way forward is to urgently and collectively reverse this dangerous trend in global warming. We must drastically reorient the economic and social patterns of our daily lives, redesign our built environment, align ourselves with nature, and restore the natural systems in and around our cities, towns, and regions. At this Daring Cities Forum, we will demonstrate visionary leadership, lead by example, share our knowledge actively, speak openly, and with a united voice. Together with all our partners, I wish you excellent discussions and learnings, and I encourage you to make the most of our offerings. Thank you very much.
So right now we'd kindly ask you can see on the side of your hop-in panel, we've opened a poll to ask, has your city or region already declared a climate emergency? We can see a number of responses already coming in. And then in our next speaker, we're very thrilled to welcome Johan Rockström as our opening keynote speaker today. Professor Rockström is an internationally recognized scientist on global sustainability issues. He's well known for leading the development of the Planetary Boundaries Framework for Human Development in the current era of rapid global change. Professor Rockström is a leading scientist on global water resources with more than 25 years of experience in applied water research in tropical regions and more than 150 research publications in fields ranging from applied land and water management to global sustainability. Professor Rockström, the floor is yours.
So dear colleagues, thanks for inviting me to this important meeting of the Daring Cities 2021. What I'd like to do is to provide you with a scientific update on the state of the post-pandemic climate challenge we're facing. And this is not only a climate transition, it is really the question of how are we now going to avoid destabilizing the entire Earth system and thereby undermining the climate system and risks of livelihoods and well-being for all future generations on planet Earth. It has come to this through the scientific evidence that we today have unequivocal support for, that we've entered a new geological epoch, the Anthropocene. We are now, the modern world, us humans, the dominating driving force of change on the entire planet. The scale, the speed, and the interconnectivity of impacts are unprecedented, exponential, and impacting today across all economies, across all societies. Cities where we have today roughly 50% of world population, projected to 60, 70% over the next few decades, are not only the main livelihood source for the majority of the world populations, is not only the driving force of our economies and our socioeconomic development, it's also cities that are largely unprepared for the adaptive capacities, but also for the resilience building and for the transitions towards what I call zero carbon adaptive capacities required over the next 30 years. We know that roughly 60% of the cities we need in the world are not even built yet, just in terms of the rapid growth of urbanization in the world. So here we have a pivotal point for humanity's future. And this now has to be put in the context of the unequivocal scientific evidence we have of a global climate crisis. The IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change 6 assessment, came out now in August, its first report, showing very dramatic numbers. So not only are we today having 100% unequivocal certainty that we're causing global warming, which had reached 1.1 degrees Celsius, the warmest temperature on Earth since we left the last ice age 12,000 years ago. We also know that we're loading so much climate forcing through greenhouse gas emissions that is the highest level in 2 million years. We have the fastest rate of sea level rise today at 3, soon 4 millimeters per year, 4 centimeters per decade, 25 centimeters so far. Arctic sea ice is melting exponentially. We are losing glaciers at an unprecedented scale, the source of fresh water to many parts in the world, having impacts that are today not only well documented, but incredibly hardly felt among urban and rural societies across the world, with extreme heat, heavy rainfall, droughts, fires, ocean acidification impacting. And we've seen just the last few years, heat waves across Europe, the unprecedented impacts in both the US, in Caribbean, in monsoon hitting in Mumbai, so on and so forth. Where does this come from? Well, it's not only the heating in the atmosphere, it's also that we know the basic physics. For every 1 degree Celsius warming, we also load the atmosphere with 7% more moisture. We are powering up the system very rapidly with more extreme rainfall events. Water is generally the #1 cause for disasters, droughts, floods, sea level rise. These are the hurricane impacts. These are the factors we now see already coming so hard and faster than we had expected. But most importantly, I would argue in the IPCC latest assessment is this graph. Not only does it show, as you see, the classic hockey stick of remarkable speed of the warming caused since we started burning fossil fuels, but it also confirms that over the past 100,000 years, we've never passed 1 degree Celsius. So we have already now, at 2021, crashed through the ceiling of the warmest temperature on Earth over the past 100,000 years. And just look at the remarkable stability on Earth over the past 2,000 years and how we are today passing very rapidly in the Anthropocene outside of that corridor. The impacts of this are felt today, but look at the scenarios for the future. Here is one basic scenario that leaves many scientists with deep nervousness. What you see here in color is the very well familiar maps of socioeconomic fragility or stability. So the darker the blue, the more stable economies, the darker the red, the more fragile economies. This is a well-known pattern. What you see here in the dark blobs here are the regions in the world that today have an annual mean temperature exceeding 30 degrees Celsius. So these are, not surprisingly, small spots in the Sahara Desert, hosting overall less than 150 million people. This is because we have physiological experience that if you have an average temperature above 30 degrees Celsius, we simply have large threats for human health and even risks of mortality. But look at the hatched lined areas. This is the geographic expanse of regions that will have at least 30 degrees Celsius of average mean annual temperature if we continue burning fossil fuels as today, already in 50 years' time. So this is 2070. This is just 2 generations away. And look at the areas. We're talking Brazil, West Africa, Horn of Africa, North Africa, Middle East, India, Southeast Asia, projected to host 3.5 billion people in only 50 years' time. This is a geopolitical destabilizer of grand scale. So this is what we're facing if we do not bend the curves right now. But it's even more challenging than that, because it's not only about phasing out fossil fuels, it's about, as IPCC concludes, about maintaining the carbon sinks in nature. 56% of our emission of greenhouse gases since we started burning fossil fuels have been taken up of land-based ecosystems, primarily forests, and the ocean. And I can tell you that all the scenarios that scientists show can take us to the Paris Climate Agreement of keeping the global warming well below 2 and aiming for 1.5 assume that this capacity will remain intact, meaning that we depend not only on phasing out fossil fuels, we depend also on keeping ecosystems intact, rainforests, temperate forests, wetlands, grasslands, permafrost. So this is the challenge we have. But the IPCC also concludes that we already today face long-term commitments of irreversible changes in terms of ocean acidification, in terms of deoxygenization of coastal zones, meaning dead zones in the ocean. In terms of sea level rise, up to 1 meter this century, we cannot exclude 2 meters this century. But look at the third point here. Over the next 2,000 years, we are already at 1.5 degrees Celsius, very likely committing all future generations to up to 2 meters sea level rise. It will take a long time before it materializes, but it's irreversible. These are commitments that we decide now whether we're handing over a planet to all future generations with a lesser capacity to support human livelihoods. But we can also not, in the latest IPCC assessment, exclude tipping points. This is still high uncertainty scientifically, but these are what is generally called low probability, high impact events. This is, to put it simple, catastrophic risks. The risks of destabilizing the West Antarctic ice shelf with multi-meter sea level rise occurring much faster. The risk of destabilizing the ocean circulation in North Atlantic, the AMOC, which changes life conditions in the Northern Hemisphere and even impacting on monsoon systems. The Arctic and practically losing summer ice there over the next decades. So these are risks of tipping points that we have been mapping outside of the IPCC, shown here in black, the 9 out of 15 known big climate tipping elements that are showing signs of approaching tipping points. So not that we are at the tipping points, but that we are at risk. And what you see here are not only big systems like permafrost, coral reefs, rainforest, West Antarctica, boreal forest, Greenland. You see also the arrows that they are interconnected with each other. We lose ice melting on Greenland, releasing cold fresh water into the North Atlantic, slowing down the ocean heat circulation, the AMOC in the North Atlantic, which in turn, as far as we know today, impacts on the monsoon system in South America, which can explain more droughts and forest fires in the rainforest, but it also holds more warm water in the Southern Ocean that gets locked there and can explain the rising melt of the West Antarctic ice shelf. So it's not surprising that the IPCC concludes that the pathway to the future is the lowest blue line here. It's about bending the global curve of emissions today and landing at a net zero world economy by mid-century. That is the pathway, and it is a pathway which, almost personally at least I feel, can lead to over-optimism to some extent, because here are the carbon budgets associated with that pathway. To land at 1.5 degrees Celsius, for a 50% chance, we have 500 billion tons of carbon dioxide remaining that we can be allowed to emit. Well, but a 50% chance of avoiding potential disasters in the future seems to me like, betting on something with much too high risk. So if we want to have a 2/3 chance of success, we have only 400 billion tons remaining. And divide by 42, which is what we emit today every year, we have less than 10 years remaining. if we continue burning as today. So this just shows us that this is an urgent point of turnaround. But just to give you the summary of what this entails, well, the turnaround is shown in gray here, which is, landing at a net zero world economy by mid-century. It follows the carbon law of cutting emissions by half every decade. But that won't be enough. We also need to turn around the food system, agriculture, shown here in the brown wedge, which is a large emitter today, to become a sink of carbon from mid-century onward. We also need to start scaling negative emission technology through CCS and BECCS, shown here in orange. But most importantly, we have to maintain the carbon sinks in nature, shown here in green and blue. So there is no safe landing unless cities in the world start taking a full systems approach to decarbonizing, sustainable food systems, and maintaining carbon sinks along the whole value chain to nature. How are we doing today? Well, we're heading towards 2.7 degrees Celsius in the latest update of the national determined contributions. And the journey we need to follow, all cities in the world, all nations, is shown here. We are at a point where, just look at the United States and EU and Japan to the left, where the turnaround to reach zero by 2050 is a dramatic transformation. But look at China, which has now committed to net zero no later than 2060. Too late scientifically, but just look at the journey they have to take. So we're talking about big turnarounds that have to occur this century, this decade, and has to happen over the next 30 years. And of course, cities are fundamental to get that momentum off the ground. But I just want to leave you with the fact that it is about staying within the safe operating space of planetary boundaries. There's no way that we can land Paris by only decarbonizing the energy system. We need to stay within planetary boundaries also of nature, so that we can come back to the green space here, and not in order to sacrifice or back off from good human well-being and equity, but rather placing the Sustainable Development Goals, all the 17 goals of aspiring good future for humans living in cities and in rural areas within the safe operating space of a stable and resilient planet. We've come to that. That's the way to navigate the Anthropocene. And of course, daring cities is, I would argue, one of the major leverage points of potential success in that transformation. Thank you very much, and good luck with your important work.
Wonderful. Thank you for those thought-provoking words, Professor Rockström. I am now joined by Yunus Arakan, our Director of Global Advocacy for ICLEI. Welcome, Yunus. And in a few minutes, Yunus is going to be speaking with some daring local leaders about their responses to the climate emergency. But first, we're going to take a look at our audience's responses to our earlier questions. So we'll bring that up. And Yunus, while we're taking a look at that, what are you seeing here?
Well, actually, that was impressive because, of course, the first line is the cities or the participants are living in cities, like 40% are living in cities that has not declared climate emergency. But this one is also that 60% are among those who have declared it. And let's remember Gino's mentioning that 2,000 around the world, what we were expecting the cities who have declared that. It's around 100,000 cities worldwide. And that connects perfectly to the spirit and the message of Johan Rockström. If we are to make a change, daring cities are the place to do it. And more than half of our members have been involved in this process, and they are here to learn, they are here to share. And I think that's the fantastic reason why I would like to listen the real action from the ground from our mayors and leaders across the world. That's my conclusion.
Wonderful, thank you.
So, actually, it was a nice introduction to our next session, as Ariel mentioned. But before introducing our colleagues, guests, I also would like to introduce another topic that, first of all, this year we are using this interactive session. Hopin platform is giving us the diversity of our voices. And now I see in the chat box online, live, we have representatives from Honolulu, from Hawaii, at the same time Belo Horizonte, from Brazil, from Gambia, from Finland, from Perth, Australia, they're all eager to listen to our leaders, and they're actively contributing to the discussion. This is really giving us a huge hope that this Daring Cities will be the place where we would be amplifying. And now we will be having 30 minutes of a dialogue with three distinguished pioneering leaders across the world. Mayor Katja Dörner from city of Bonn in Germany, Mayor Abi Binay from Makati City in Philippines, who are both members of ICLEI Global Executive Committee, leading climate and innovative finance agendas respectively, as well as Kathy Lee from China, but currently joining us from London in the UK as the global coordination team member of the youth constituency to the UNFCCC. I will not go into in detailed presentation of each of them because I want to reserve more of our time for their inspirational discussions and inspirational visions. But I'm confident that all our participants will agree that their passion and their leadership will represent a perfect match to the challenging and exciting calls of Dr. Rockström on ambitious climate action. And that's why we'd like to thank all of our speakers for their time for dialogue and their leadership. I'd like to suggest that we build this discussion into three, let's say, chapters. One, visions and challenges, and then the final way forward. At each round, I'd like to address customized questions to each of our guests, and I'd like to kindly request them to frame their responses around 3 to 4 minutes in each cycle. So if this would be okay for all of us, and I'm sure now our colleagues, our leaders, guests are connected appropriately, let me start by the mayor of the city that the session is being hosted in physically and virtually in the city of Bonn. We have Mayor Katja Dörner, who has been the mayor of this city in the last 12 months or so, and we are aware city of Bonn has been pioneering in this processes. It's also the host of the UN Climate Secretariat. As early as 2019, City of Bonn has declared climate emergency and climate neutrality. However, we'd like to now listen from Mayor Dörner how she has built upon this foundation in 2019 and how she has advanced both her administration and city council in terms of Bonn's climate strategies. Mayor Dörner, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello to everybody. I'm glad that I'm able to discuss this very important topic this morning concerning climate emergency. The declaration of climate emergency has been offering valuable opportunities to shape our climate policies towards the necessary transformation. On our way in Bonn to achieve climate neutrality in 2035, we have encountered a wave of support and mobilization within the civil society. Those who attended Daring Cities 2020 might remember our joint presentation with the transformational initiative Bonn im Wandel last year. In an intensive citizen-driven participation process named Bonn for Future, we are collecting new ideas and proposals for a climate-neutral future. This process is in full swing at the moment, bringing citizens and stakeholders together in fora and workshops, which have turned out to be a great source of knowledge, of ideas, and of inspiration. A climate assembly has been convened, composed of randomly selected citizens, which has proven to be a very inclusive way of engaging a broader public. This was also a new and a really inspiring impression for the whole city administration as well. And regardless of age, status, or education, the people of Bonn are invited to become part of Bonn's climate future. And I think this inclusive way is of a very high importance. So for the first time, we are in a process of co-creating with the whole system while drawing from an incredible crowd intelligence. And also in this process, we are placing a strong focus on the actual needs of our people and on how to respond without violating planetary boundaries. And this is a huge difference because we are thinking in terms of results instead of methodology. We are building our own inclusive and collaborative culture of climate ambition in and for Bonn. In parallel, We are working on our administration's part toward climate neutrality by engaging all city entities and public branches. Our climate neutrality goal challenges us to completely change the course in many areas, in particular with regard to mobility transition, renewable energy use, and the transformation of the building sector. For example, we are focusing on new mobility concepts, including the extension of bike lanes, along with the creation of urban mobility hubs. We have already launched a new program, such as a company mobility management initiative and waste reduction through reuse campaigns. Just recently, the Bonn City Council took important steps to unleash more potential for renewable energies in Bonn. According to our solar roof cadastre, around 2/3 of all roof surfaces in Bonn are suitable for solar energy generation, while only around 2% of the potential is currently being used. So we have now made photovoltaics mandatory for all buildings whose planning can be influenced by the city. I think this was a very important step on our way to climate neutrality in 2035. We also launched a new subsidy program to support citizens in installing a photovoltaic system. This time we are providing incentives not only for house owners, but also for tenants, more potential yet unleashed. So these are the steps we are working on at the moment.
These were excellent, I think, models of different diversity, both in terms of engaging, but also offering concrete solutions. I think this will be really a good insight for many, many cities around the world. I would like to now give the floor to Mayor Binay from Philippines, Makati City. Obviously, we are aware climate neutrality is something that we all inspire, but in the midst of enormous challenges of a broad variety of climate extremes, which is being faced almost every day. Therefore, we all are aware that climate action has to go hand in hand with strengthening the resilience of urban infrastructure, as well as preparing our communities to cope with these disasters. This year especially, we have seen from across the world, from fires to floods, that is really part of our new normal. So this year, actually, this is one of the new things that we have heard over this couple of months since the last Daring Cities. You have been pioneering a new initiative with the UN Climate Champions on Race to Resilience. As a leader of city of like Makati, a city which is one of the most populous in the world, and it's a disaster-prone region, can you highlight, Mayor Binay, how acting on resilience can also motivate your communities to transform into climate-friendly living? The floor is yours.
In Makati, we envision a city where residents and all other stakeholders are in constant state of preparedness, while where resilience is a way of life. But Makati faces perennial threats, especially as we sit on flood-prone areas and on an active fault line. As mandated under the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act of 2010, we allocate at least 5% of our revenues to disaster resilience programs and activities every year and ensure the fund's optimal utilization. So for the past 5 years, we have invested in modernizing our physical assets for climate and disaster resilience and in building the capability of our first responders at the city and community levels. While we want to make Makatis feel safe and secure, we also want them to be able to help themselves in times of emergency. Thus, we have adopted the self-help, mutual help, and public help. This is the approach we wish to attain for us to be able to attain our resilience goals. Local governments cannot do it alone, so we need to promote self-reliance and increase the adaptive capacity of our constituents. We need to go out of our way to provide the appropriate platform and create an enabling environment for them to also give their fair share towards climate-friendly living and resilience. One of our priorities in recent years have been to raise the awareness of vulnerable sectors about the risks and threats they face and how they can mitigate the impacts. Our target risk communication strategy involved face-to-face dialogues where resilience experts serve as credible resource persons. We enforced We reinforce the message through regular fire and earthquake drills in communities and schools, installing markers in fault line and buffer zones, and signages for evacuation routes, and distributing go bags to families in danger zones and all public school students. At City Hall, we walk the talk by advocating the use of LED lighting in all our city-owned buildings and facilities, and conservation measures like recycling, two-side printing, and paperless correspondence, among others. Hopefully, you'll be able to have another PPP initiative, which is to install solar streetlights throughout the city. Our business sector has likewise been receptive to our risk-sensitive and climate-friendly policies aimed to promote business resilience and green infrastructure and practices. This has been a result of our strict monitoring of compliance and of granting incentives for the use of green building technologies and adaptation measures, among others. Our experience shows how strong political will can work if it is anchored on mutual trust built through transparent and participatory governance.
Thank you. I think this makes a fantastic introduction to Kathy, because one thing that is common in both of the cities, different sizes, different contexts, one commonality is that both of these leaders are working with their citizens. They are not putting us and them, but they are building together. Success and failure is going hand in hand, and they are motivating them to act together. And the youth constituency we have seen in the streets have been actively promoting these ideas. Kathy, last year we had Hita joining us in the opening plenary, and over these years, and you have heard from these examples from Mayor of Bonn and Makati City, can you give us what additional experience you have had so that you're not just on the streets, but part of the efforts? How do you feel that you are heard, and how does this make you feel much more motivated?
Yeah, thanks so much, Eunice. And I guess probably worth giving a brief introduction about Youngle. So we are, as Eunice said, the youth constituency to the UNFCCC. So of course, our constituency and also of course our favorite city is definitely Bonn because of that. So by constituency, it means that we are the ones who represent youth voices in the UNFCCC process. So just like how LGMA represents voices of local governments. So in Youngle, we have over 10,000 individual members and over 100 member organizations. So from all around the world. So we are communicating with, youth across the world, and also engaging, many of them are engaging with their local governments and on a regional and local level. And of course, we have a very passionate working group on cities specifically with almost 100 members, also from around the world. And like Gino said, that cities are, of course, at the center of climate change agenda, and it is critical and also relevant to many UNFCCC topics, for example, technology, finance, action for climate empowerment, and of course, like, for example, oceans, like Professor Johan just mentioned. And I guess in terms of examples of youth groups who feel that they are heard and responded by their leaders, our colleague also from Youngle, Patricia, will be joining another session of Daring Cities later, and will share her experience lobbying the city of Lucca when went from being somewhat terrified by Fridays for Future protests to include them in the environmental agenda, and of course embracing their requests and to actually hear their voices. And of course, we have many similar examples across all regions, and also from a UNFCCC side, of course, that also society constituencies, we always support each other, and through a policy level, we also push, national governments, also subnational governments, to move forward and to hear more views from the youth.
I think that was a concrete message to all our participants, who are hundreds of representatives from across the world, is a clear call that both to your administrations, but also youth groups, that the more you're connected, the more, let's say, commitment you can be positive about, and that you can be more motivated to act. So while this is good, it's not always the bright. I mean, we have challenges, let's be realistic, especially limited technical capacity and effective governance mechanisms is a key concern. But one of the biggest concerns is that, considering the scale of investments that Johan mentioned, financing is a key barrier, both in the north and in cities in the south. So it is across the world. So let's continue with Mayor Binay, because Mayor Binay is also leading ICLEI's work on innovative finance. She's elected as the innovative finance portfolio manager this April. Since or 6 months, she's now leading this process. also in her capacity in the Global Covenant of Mayors. So, Mayor Bina, innovation and finance, do you think it is getting better that our cities can access to finance more effectively? How do you see our progress on that?
Well, I think the ICLEI's heart of the innovative finance portfolio is a transformative actions program, or TAP. This will allow access to financing for projects that cannot be financed. So this is bridging the gap. So its mission is to enable access to finance to scale up local climate action, accelerate low to no emission and climate resilient development, and support national ambition through transformative infrastructure projects. So TAP is a project preparation facility with tailored services to guide project development to achieve maturity and be finance ready. It's also an advocacy instrument presenting the demand and diversity of subnational projects seeking financing. So currently, half of the submissions are actually from Africa and only 9% comes from Asia. And we're encouraging local governments with ambitious, cross-cutting and inclusive projects in any size or level of maturity to submit to TAP. And with the support from our partners, your project could materialize. And through financing. The TAP call for 2021 is now open. So for us in Makati, the pandemic has also highlighted the importance of engaging the private sector and development partners in resilience building, particularly in undertaking transformative infrastructure projects that are capital intensive. So one such partnership that has led us one partnership is the ongoing construction of our Makati subway, which I consider my legacy project. So this is expected to have a significant impact on city workers' mobility, with 2 million per day predicted to use a train system. It will also significantly improve air quality, and by 2048, the subway is expected to reduce 2.3 million tons of carbon dioxide each year. So climate proofing through innovative finance can also be in the form of risk transfer through insurance. All city-owned facilities such as city hall complexes, hospitals, schools, barangay halls, and health centers are insured. We also provide personal accident insurance coverage to all city and barangay officials and workers. So even job order employees are included. So to promote social economic resilience, we have established community-based initiatives on micro-insurance and microfinancing. So we're currently tapping microfinance institutions for partnerships through the Philippine Disaster Resilience Foundation. So cities all over the world have been adversely affected by the pandemic and the economic lockdown, but it should not deter us from pursuing concrete and sustainable actions in response to the climate emergency. And we only have to explore the possibilities and opportunities being offered by ICLEI and other development partners to overcome the challenges and become part of the solution. So again, we are accepting proposals for TAP, and hopefully we will be able to help your dream projects come to reality.
Excellent. In fact, throughout this week, there will be trainings as well as throughout the months, and especially on Wednesday, we will have this discussion with the financing institutions. I think the key message is that there is more and more opportunities that those who are committed to climate emergency are able to reach to resources, but of course we want to increase this. And one of the things that goes to Mayor Derner, there is a perception that as long as you're in the north, you should have all the resources available and there's no problem. Why are you not acting? But climate emergency is something different than business as usual, and it has its own challenges. Can you share your experiences in how you are able to face these challenges from your innovation in your city?
First and foremost, I really like to stress that it is time, and we cannot lose time anymore. So we really have to act now. And also in Bonn, we are already experiencing a glimpse of what is coming towards us. We had a flood disaster this summer, which hit the neighboring districts. And it is a sad and terrible warning of what will be if we are too slow. So Bonn has, of course, been assisting our neighbors in this catastrophe. Also, we have been preparing to protect ourselves for years with an adaptation strategy, with studies on risks and vulnerability, with early warning, flood protection, and capacity building, with learning and networking. For example, we have initiated a network of organizations working in the fields of disaster research and disaster management, the Bonn Network International Civil Protection and Disaster Management, that brings together the expertise of universities, including the United Nations University, capacity builders and implementers like our own fire department, for example. And of course, we are networking within the ICLEI resilience community. So it comes down to networking and streamlining our joint efforts to successfully race against time. I think networking and streamlining are the most important techniques that we are working with. So in all fields, we must scale up our efforts for a massive transformation, for an economic, environmental, and social sustainable U-turn. And that is what we are trying in Bonn at the moment.
Indeed, there's no safe haven on earth at the moment. So all our leaders, regardless of their geographical space positioning, we have to be active. And of course, citizens are the partners. Kathy, what we have been experiencing, and again, the other side of the coin, that you have been in thousands of youth on the streets. But as you have seen, the examples like Makati, Bonn, and we'll see across this week, we are seeing that not all of the cities are still in this, let's say, journey. How are you offering help as youth groups to help them to be more ambitious?
Yeah, I really agree that indeed, like besides the cities who are really open-minded and welcome civil society, especially youth voices on climate change, and listening to them, and also sometimes even including them in decision-making process or implementation. Of course, there are regions and countries where it's still very hard for civil society and youth to raise their voices. And of course, I guess in terms of a few ways that we've seen youth and other civil society stakeholders have been doing. One is, of course, I think more legislators and more members of local governments have raised their awareness, and also, for example, some of them also gather each year, every year ahead of COP for their conference on legislators, which also has a strong youth component. So we have seen more legislators raising awareness, and of course that also will push other legislators to realize how important this agenda item is. And also that we live in a world of social media, although personally I don't use it much, but I think that this is a very important tool for youth to raise their voice and also to be actually heard and taken seriously. And of course, we've seen that sometimes when there is a decision-making or a policy that youth in general is strongly against, when people express their views on the internet, the policymakers, they do take this very seriously, and it does spread very fast. And even in some countries where, for example, protests or other forms of voices are hard to be heard. And then I guess another approach is probably more bottom-up, is the traditional protest approach, which of course may be difficult for some regions and countries. And then besides bottom-up protest, there's also top-down, because we both participate in the UNFCCC process, and therefore we can demand countries to raise ambition. And for example, I guess an example on technology is the CTCN, which is the implementation arm of the UNFCCC technology mechanism. So they have given recognition to a technology called Bonn from India, which is a technology that also helps alleviating the historical gender gap in this field. And of course, through the UNFCCC, civil society pushed for policy changes, which is how that technology could be recognized and be brought forward to more eyes, and also be implemented, which of course is a very effective way for civil society stakeholders like youth to learn from. And of course, Ines also mentioned about the capacity is also another challenge, especially that might be the reason sometimes why some local governments may put youth at the bottom of their priority list. And similar, like how some countries see the UNFCCC topic, Action for Climate Empowerment, because they just don't recognize the importance of it. But at the same time, I think youth participation can actually ease the limit of capacity and provide innovative and efficient solutions.
Indeed, now we're going to the last round of our discussion on the way forward. And I'd like to again start with Mayor Dörner, because this learning from each other, be it your neighbor or be it another fellow mayor, is important. So as one of the cities who are on the front runner and which is still also in the learning phase, how do you wish to share your recommendations and that this movement can be accelerated? The floor is yours, Mayor Dörner.
So firstly, I would say use the initial spark and momentum a declaration of climate emergency can bring to your local policymaking process. The consensus will unite the different factions under one common goal, namely a safe future for your city and your people. That is what we experienced in Bonn as well in 2019 and since then. And it will also empower your city hall staff when backed up by an unanimous decision. I know that my co-panelist, Mayor Abigail Binay, is about to start a climate emergency process in Makati, and I commend her for her example and leadership. I'm happy to lend support within the network. And secondly, when working towards climate neutrality, always also focus on social participation for all. Changes as deep as a climate transformation will only work when owned by the people. We need everyone on board. This is very relevant in my view. To me, it is essential to leave no one behind, not even those who are as hesitant to engage. It is our task to mobilize them, to convince them, to win them over to the side of ratio, because it is in their town, it's their vital interest. I am concerned about catastrophic scenarios and the unavoidable losses waiting for us on that pathway. And at the same time, I feel encouraged by the mobilization I see all around me. Fridays for Future, for example, in Bonn. In particular, the young people who get involved, and also here within the eCLI network. Being this and learning about the commitment and the motivation of so many fellow leaders, I believe the transformation is possible. Daring Cities 2021 certainly is one of the stepping stones to this momentum. So let's make use of this. Thank you very much for your attention.
Excellent, Mayor Dörner. And while you're talking, I see Mayor Binay nodding her head because I think that is something that we all have to take home. So Mayor Binay, we have seen that you're so ambitious in the city, but still there may be some more things to do. How do you think from your lessons here or discussions here that we can next year when we come back to show a bit more different or elevated action in Makati, knowing that you have some visions on that front as well. So the floor is yours.
Well, I think you have to first lay down a groundwork for immediate and medium and long-term goals. You have a long-term goal and you have a short-term goal for the city. So the short-term goal includes just simple cleaning and greening projects, teaching climate consciousness to your, that's why I kept on nodding my head. You know, it's like, if you have to indoctrinate people, you have to change the culture of people. So you have to educate. So that's your short-term, that's your very short-term and immediate goal. So simple, reduce, reuse, recycle, repurpose, eco-related lessons that we teach to our students, like simple waste management. We actually distributed tumblers, reusable water tumblers to all our public students, so that we don't have to use waters in plastic containers. So we hope to develop climate change champions like Greta Thunberg, who will continue these campaigns for future generations. The medium term includes a more walkable city. We actually we're creating more bike lanes. We're encouraging more people to use e-vehicles and hybrid buses in partnership with other LGUs on the transport sector. So we also, as I've said, we also have our subway project, which is hopefully will be complete in 2025. So for our long-term goals, we are creating the DRRM Council, the Climate Change Council, to ensure that our efforts to achieve net zero will not be forgotten in the coming years. So the only way to accelerate these efforts is to actively campaign for the implementation of all these measures in all sectors of society. We continue to drum up awareness in the youth and various communities. And more importantly, again, we have partnered with the private sector. So these efforts can be applied in businesses and industries. And they also help us fund very important campaigns and projects. So I'm very envious of Bonn, because of course, you're way ahead. But if you can do it, then I'm sure we can do it as well.
Excellent. Excellent. And actually, as a politician, you do not have the luxury to choose one to the other. It all has to be at the same time. And I think that's the reason why we are trying to make sure that you can learn from each other, you can share your experience and make it better. So Kathy, next year when you come here, what is your the expectation so that you can be confident that we're on the right track and we're responding to Johan Rockström and all the others? So what is your dream in a nutshell, because knowing that there will be other speakers throughout the week from Youth Constituency as well. So please, your final words.
Yeah, I guess, of course, next year it would be really great to hear more ambitious actions from even more cities and more across more regions, and following the path of these two amazing cities that we love, and of course to include youth in both policy-making, decision-making process, and also implementation, and of course to also collaborate with other civil society stakeholders like women and indigenous peoples that we always work together, and of course to also listen to the voices of youth in all the processes as well.
Excellent, excellent. I'd like to conclude this round. I really thank you all, both for your leadership and your time. While we were talking, the number of polls has increased. The percentage didn't change. This still shows that we are the ones on the front runner of this process. And I encourage you to continue to click on your polls, comments. And now I'd like to announce that we have a special guest from Korea, which has also made a remarkable movement in his country, Mayor Yom Ta-yong from Suwon, who has been a long-time champion of ICLE on a number of fronts. So he will share how local governments in Korea has been mobilized, both in emergency, but also climate neutrality. We are now listening to video message from Mayor Yong.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I am Yom Tae-young, Mayor of the city of Suwon in the Republic of Korea. First, I'd like to express my gratitude to ICLE for its continued efforts to respond to the climate emergency in the COVID-19 pandemic. Today is World Habitat Day, being held with the theme of Accelerating Urban Action for a Carbon-Free World. Representing the local governments of Korea, I'm very honored to convey our will and message regarding carbon neutrality on this significant day. Last year, Korea's local governments declared their firm determination to respond to the climate emergency. In June 2020, a climate emergency declaration was announced by all the local governments in Korea, and 1 month later, 80 local governments came together to strengthen their determination to pursue carbon neutrality, launching the Net Zero Coalition of Local Governments. This coalition, of which I am serving as president, began expanding rapidly soon after its launch, with the result that currently 215 local governments, 88% of the total, are joining these efforts. This endeavor has led to the adoption of Climate Emergency Response Resolution by the Korean National Assembly and a National 2050 Net Zero Declaration in September last year. The 2050 Carbon Neutrality Committee, launched under the direct control of the President this year, and the Framework Act on Carbon Neutrality passed by the National Assembly last month, can be understood in this context. At the special session of the P4G summit held in Seoul in May, all of South Korea's 243 local governments participated and delivered their 2050 joint declaration of carbon neutrality. This is the first endeavor of its kind in which all of the localities in the country participated and announced their commitment to carbon neutrality. Now, let me touch upon the net zero policies that the city of Suwon has been implementing. Already a decade ago, Suwon has set GHG reduction targets to achieve a reduction of 40% by 2030 compared to 2005. Since then, the city's progress has been evaluated by calculating GHG emissions, and the results are reported through the CDP ICLEI integrated reporting system every year. The GCOM batch, which has been with Suwon since 2008, reflects our unwavering will to achieve carbon neutrality. Our participation this July in the Race to Zero, a global campaign to achieve 2050 net zero, is also worthy of note. Led by these proactive efforts by the city of Suwon, 22 local governments belonging to the Net Zero Coalition of local governments have joined GCOM and participated in the Race to Zero. Suwon, located in an inland with 1.23 million residents, is a city of high population density. Reflecting these characteristics, the city has developed three strategies. First, a hydrogen fuel ecosystem. Second, stage-based models to spread net zero from buildings to neighborhoods and to the entire city. And third, urban integration policies for sustainable development. And quantitative policy goals have also been set accordingly. Aiming for a reduction of 50% in total energy use by 2050, mandatory measures for zero energy buildings are being phased in starting from public sector last year. Through continuing energy efficiency projects for old buildings, such as enforcing insulation and replacing windows, we plan to convert all the city structures into green buildings. In addition, by 2025, about 1,000 city buses will have been replaced with electric buses, and by 2050, all the internal combustion engine vehicles in the city's entire fleet, including passenger cars, trucks, and motorcycles, will have been converted to electric and hydrogen vehicles. New and renewable energy and waste energy, such as incineration heat and biogas, will be used to phase out fossil fuel from the current 45% to zero, and the energy independence rate will be enhanced to 80%. After COVID-19, the Korean government announced the Korean version of the New Deal last year to jointly address the economic and climate crises. In July, a plan for the more advanced Korean version of the New Deal 2.0 was also presented along with the progress made during the first year. This Green New Deal includes as key strategies such projects as green remodeling, dissemination of eco-friendly vehicles, conversion to new and renewable energy, and expansion of green infrastructure. As the president of the Net Zero Coalition of local governments, I will encourage local government-led specialized Green New Deal projects and share local success models nationwide and further to the world. I will do my best to realize our goal of net zero based on autonomy and locally initiated energy policies. This is time to act. Let your actions speak louder than words. I hope the local governments, as well as global networks in Korea and other parts of the world, can join together in their efforts to pursue actions to combat the climate emergency. I believe this forum will provide an opportunity to share practical inspiration, building awareness of what we need to change now and how to put it into place. As we move forward, Suwon will continue to collaborate with other local governments and with ICLEI as a global leading net zero city. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor Yom. In fact, this is just a teaser for other cities that they will be showing across the day and in the afternoon, also throughout the week. And I thank you. See still additional comments coming from question and answer. We will wrap up and we will make sure that you can continue to learn during the platform and the week. So maybe I give the floor for Ariel for taking us through how we will mobilize ourselves throughout the week. And I thank you all for your patience about some slight delays in the timing, but I think it was worthwhile to hear all these inputs. Thank you very much, Ariel. The floor is yours.
Absolutely agreed, Eunice. Wonderful interventions from all of our leaders here. So we are nearing the end of our session. We know we're a few minutes over here, but we will be taking you through just an overview here of what you can expect at Daring Cities and how to make the most of it.
Welcome to Daring Cities 2021. We're so excited to welcome you. For the next 5 days, we'll all be a part of a global exchange. You'll join thought leaders and practitioners from around the world while we explore the daring cities and regions that are taking bold climate action. Attend high-level sessions and technical trainings and workshops to deepen your knowledge on implementable solutions and approaches. Be sure to create a profile on Hopin and take advantage of the networking opportunities to directly connect with fellow Daring Cities participants from around the world. On October 8, we'll review our outcomes and prepare for the second Daring Cities cornerstone, Disseminate. Throughout Urban October, the Daring Cities outcomes will be delivered at global events so that leaders from around the world hear what local and regional leaders need to be able to follow through on the ambitious climate action needed to tackle the climate emergency. Finally, as part of our third cornerstone, Advocate, we'll bring our message to COP26, and you're invited. Join us either virtually or in person at the Multi-Level Action Pavilion to see and hear from our local and regional leaders and bring the Daring Cities message to the world stage. The journey of Daring Cities 2021 begins today. We're so glad you've decided to be a part of leading in the climate emergency. Welcome.
So once again, thank you to all of our speakers and exemplary leaders today for this session. Thank you to all of you for joining us for this first session. We're so excited to see so much participation and action happening in the chat and in our polls. We invite you now to join us for the rest of the day today. There are 5 more great sessions happening throughout the day today, and then of course throughout the rest of the week. As soon as this session is over, we will have 30 minutes of a networking session in called Daring Cities Connect. So you can get to that by clicking on the networking tab, which is on the left side of your screen. So as soon as we close out this session, we invite you to join us there for the next 30 minutes. You'll get the chance to meet fellow Daring Cities attendees and get the chance to exchange in person, even though we can't be together in the same place. And we'll see you there. Have a great day.